Good afternoon. Welcome to Lessons in Leadership, Feedback and Accountability with Amy Bazell and Montana Johnston. I'm Jessica Dang with Results Washington. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your moderator today. Today, we have about 970 attendees registered for the session, and we're so happy that you're here. I'm joined today by Melissa Shaw, who will be providing ASL interpretation today. Thanks to my teammate, John, who's managing technology behind the scenes. I want to share a few things before we get started. We know many of you are familiar with Zoom meetings, but there are some differences in Zoom webinar which we're using today. The biggest difference is you won't be able to talk or have your video visible. This makes sure all participants can focus on today's session. We want to draw your attention to the Zoom toolbar. So move your mouse towards the bottom of the screen, the toolbar will appear. Chat between participants is not available during this session, but we will be posting presentation materials in chat, so be on the lookout for that. We will be doing Q&A during today's presentation, so go ahead and drop questions in at any time during the session, and there will be some time at the end where Montana and Amy will take questions. If you're having any technical issues, please drop that in the Q&A and we'll do our best to help you. You'll notice there's an icon here for closed captioning. If you'd like to see closed captioning, click that icon and select View Full Transcript. You can adjust the screen view here to make the presentation or the speaker larger by adjusting the vertical bar from left to right. Session materials are available on our website and videos will be available within a week. If we get disconnected or run into tech troubles, we'll try to get the webinar back up within 5 minutes. In the event we aren't able to, we'll record the session and post it on our website at a later time. Finally, at the end of the session, a survey will pop up. Please take time to complete the survey. This will provide the presenter and Results Washington with great real-time feedback. Well, we are so fortunate to have Amy and Montana with us today. A little bit about both of them. Amy is an authentic, passionate, and engaging leader with a demonstrated commitment to the pursuit of excellence. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, certification in project management, and is a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. With nearly 20 years of dedicated state service, Amy believes in the holistic culture of Lean, continuously improving our processes and the people who do them, thereby ensuring the best possible outcomes for the people that we serve. Amy currently leads the DSHS Aging and Long-Term Support Administration's Lean Engagement and Innovation team as ALTA's Senior Organizational Development Administrator. Montana holds a master's degree in semiotics and is a certified leadership coach and Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. She's been a public servant for 6 years, helping to create better futures at the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries, Department of Health, and the Department of Social and Health Services. For the past 2 years, Montana has served as an outcome improvement specialist in the DSHS Aging and Long-Term Support Administration. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Boy, that's a lovely introduction. Thank you very much, Jessica. And we want to say a warm welcome and hello and thank you for joining us today to talk about accountability and feedback. We're truly honored to present at the Governor's 2021 Lean Conference. For me, I think back to the first Lean Conference a decade ago, and I cannot believe how far all of us have come as individuals and state and local public service organizations. And now here we are doing this virtually. Who would have thought? This is really innovation at its finest, and definitely the Lean way to do it in terms of eliminating waste and maximizing inclusion. So thank you to the Results Washington team, to Melissa as our interpreter today, and thank all of you for choosing to spend your valuable time with us today in this session. Our presentation today is based on a workshop that we deliver at ALTSA as part of our Lessons in Leadership series, which was born in the spring of 2020, based upon leadership responses in an all-staff survey, indicating a need for additional support with managing performance in a virtual environment. As you likely know by now, managing performance in a virtual environment is essentially the same as in person, meaning you're managing for outcomes, not minutes in the chair. Once we get past that, The issue becomes, how do you create a culture of accountability and give folks the feedback that they need to succeed and thrive? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Accountability and feedback are absolutely integral to any truly lean process, culture, or organization. But it's not always clear how or what that looks like in reality. So we endeavor to change that for you today.
While this material has been adapted slightly to highlight the lean principles and values at the root of these best practices and key leadership behaviors, what you'll see today is part of the standard leadership development portfolio we offer to support leaders at every level in ALTA in their work to transform lives. This content will be relevant to you whether you have a more formal leadership role involving direct supervision or are more informally leading, managing projects and lean events. When we use the word leader in this presentation today, we mean all of you leading from where you are. Before we launch our presentation, I want to invite you to open up the participant worksheet that we've included with your registration and that I believe was shared in the chat. It has the slide that you see on the screen at the very top, and below that, you'll see step 1A. This is a space for you to note down 3 things that you're hoping to get from today's workshop. So take a moment and note down what brought you here today. What are you hoping to learn? And at the end, we'll ask you to reflect and see how we did.
And at the end of our presentation, I know at the end of all the presentations, we do have that survey. So if there was a disconnect between what you were hoping to get and what you got, that's a great place to give us that feedback.
Absolutely.
So we want to just kind of set the foundation here by calling front and center these 12 lean management principles, which really bring together 2 pillars or core values in lean: respect for people and continuous improvement, and to highlight concepts and guidelines that support truly lean leadership. The value of respect for people calls upon leaders to demonstrate clear and open communication, to recognize and celebrate wins of all sizes, to never stop the journey of growth and learning, which requires an environment where we are both physically and psychologically safe and secure, and to make it not only safe, but encouraged to challenge the status quo and engage and include everyone.
Absolutely. And that focus on continuous improvement reminds lean leaders to empower everyone to create quality at the source, to actively eliminate waste in all of its forms, to ensure that what we do is always value added, and live that standardized work in our own work and our own processes, to ensure that we provide information and products just in time and use those concepts of flow and pull continuously. These 12 lean management principles are the foundation of our talk on accountability and feedback today. See how many of them you can spot, and we'll highlight where you can see them in action as we move through our talk.
So today we want to start by talking about the big picture of accountability, and then we're going to do a much deeper dive into feedback. So what is accountability anyway? The dictionary definition is the quality or state of being accountable. It's not terribly helpful. Accountability is often explained using the synonym responsibility, but that's not very explanatory either. We like to talk about accountability as the state of affairs that exists when people can count on each other to meet the expectations, to provide support, and to live the shared values that bring them together. I also want to take a moment just to talk a little bit about the connection between diversity, equity, and inclusion and accountability. We know that accountability supports diversity. Teams with cultures of high accountability more equitably support and engage team members from different backgrounds. Accountability promotes equity. Transparent accountability practices ensure consistent, fair expectations for everyone and act as a check on our own implicit biases. Accountability builds inclusion. Clear accountability processes promote inclusive collaboration and environments where everyone's voice can be heard. We hope that you can see that these tools and practices that could create truly lean cultures of accountability aren't just important for productive, high-performing teams. They're an essential way that we live our values of diversity, equity, and inclusion every day as leaders in Washington state government. We also want to call your attention back to the tried and true best tool in your tool belt for lean, which is the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It's one of the greatest accountability structures that we have in our lean toolkit. And in case you hadn't made the connection, the PDCA cycle is applicable and generates great results, not only when we're trying to make a change to do something new, but also as a tool for leaders in their day-to-day efforts to ensure high accountability on their teams. The usual starting place in this cycle is plan, right? Give clear instructions and expectations to the folks that you lead. Some of this direction is contained in employee position descriptions, but we know that that's rarely sufficient instruction to actually do the job or to know what's expected in terms of quality or timeliness. We need things like training, procedure manuals, and real-time guidance to do our jobs and to do them well. Those are all different ways leaders make plans and instruct their teams in how to carry them out. Once folks have instructions and understand the expectations, they engage in the do part of the cycle, applying the tools, skills, and abilities at their disposal to complete the assigned work. Of course, there are situations where people's tools, skills, and abilities aren't sufficient to do the job and do it well. And that's something leaders need to be aware of so that they can remove barriers and obtain resources to close that gap. But this do phase is where the employee does their darndest to accomplish the work that they're paid to do. And there are also steps for the leader to take in this phase to increase the probability of success. And we're going to talk about those in a few minutes. But once you have a result, now notice I didn't say once you finish the work, because sometimes not finishing the work is the result of the doing, right? That puts us in the check phase. This is the proverbial land of feedback. This is the phase where leaders assess their team members' efforts and accomplishments and let them know how they did and what that means. We're going to talk more about that in the feedback section. But now, because actionable feedback always has a what's next component, the check phase naturally transitions into the act phase, where leaders and their teams make decisions and commitments based on the feedback conversations in the check phase. How should we move into the future based on what's happened in the past? The act phase is all about moving forward. And like every other part of the PDCA cycle, it's optimized when it's done collaboratively. The decisions made during the act phase lead to the new plan phase, giving instructions and setting expectations, and voila, the cycle starts anew. I hope that you can see the very basics of accountability align with this foundational aspect of lean and PDCA. It really is how we do lean. Montana is going to take a moment here to launch a quick poll because we're curious. We know about Plan, Do, Check, Act, right? But which part of the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle is hardest for you? That's launching, have an opportunity there to give feedback. I don't know about all of you, but thank heavens we grow, right? But I would say that my abilities have changed over time. I used to struggle much more with the check piece. For a while, I struggled more with the plan part. I don't know, Montana, what do you find most challenging for you?
You know, golly, I think one of the things that can be hardest is finding yourself in that do phase when the planning hasn't been done as effectively as it should. But a lot of the teams that I talk to will tell me that they struggle with the check phase. And I'm seeing that a lot of the folks who are answering our poll are in that space too. Yeah, it's that assessing results and giving feedback that's hard. But when I really get in there and work with them, it often turns out that the checking part isn't what they have trouble with. They're having conversations, they're giving one another feedback. It's that act phase. It's making those clear commitments based on that feedback in the check phase so that they can move forward and try something new. So it looks
well-
like we have quite a few people who voted. So I'm going to go ahead and end polling and share the results with everybody. A clear winner.
Yes, well, it's a good thing that that's the winner, because the whole second half of this session is all about that feedback piece. So you're in the right place, my friends. You are in the right place. All right. So now we're going to share some best practices for each phase of your PDCA accountability cycle, starting with that plan phase, where your goal is to give instructions and set expectations. On the screen, we've broken down the essence of good instructions and expectations into 3 key elements: clarity, specificity, and priority. Having a shared understanding of each of these aspects with any task, assignment, or goal is the most important way that you can set your teams up for success and foster that culture of accountability. I invite you to start by tossing out the assumption that people should know what's expected of them, and instead take action to clearly communicate expectations, even or especially when you assume that you're all on the same page. Commit to clarity by articulating what done looks like. Brene Brown says, let's paint what done looks like, and set aside an appropriate amount of time to explore expectations together. Then get specific. If you give your team an assignment, are you also giving them a clear and specific deadline, or is the due date more nebulous and open to interpretation? Is the report due by noon on Thursday or ASAP? I can tell you from experience, ASAP means different things to different people, and it leaves the instructions and expectations open to interpretation in a way that makes accountability nearly impossible. Finally, we don't talk about priority enough. Very few of us have just one job to do or one task given to us at a time, like an assembly line. Most of us have to juggle numerous assignments and figure out how to get them done correctly, on time, with the resources available. This is true for leaders, and it's true for the folks they lead. So give yourself a say-so in how your team accomplishes that juggling act. If you want someone to put their regular daily tasks on hold to get a project done quickly, say so. If you want them to prioritize an assignment but still answer the phone when a client calls, say so. If you want to make sure that they only spend time on this if there's absolutely nothing else in the world better to do, say so. If you communicate all of these things, clarity, specificity, and priority, you are doing great. If you write them down so that you both can look back at them later and stick to the instructions, you're actually up a level to rock star. So I encourage you to look at item 2A in your worksheet and jot down an accountability challenge that you're currently experiencing. Then use the checkboxes in 2B to rate yourself on that. Were clarity, specificity, and priority present? If not, which of these was missing? This is your personal accountability check. When we looked at the do phase of our PDCA accountability cycle earlier, we mostly talked about what your team members do in order to carry out the tasks that and meet your expectations. But there's an important role for leaders to play during this phase too. Once you've set yourself up and your team up for success by providing clarity, specificity, and priority, the next step is to ask yourself a tough question. Am I accountable? Now, this question is not asking whether you meet your own deadlines and follow through on promises you make. Those are important. But when I ask, are you the leader accountable? What I want to know is, can you be counted on to hold others accountable? Do you give yourself the structure you need to hold others accountable in a timely way? If you delegate a task to your team, make sure that you set a deadline that gives you a buffer. If you've asked them to contribute slides for a presentation that you're delivering in the future, make sure that the deadline for those slides gives you time to review the work and coach folks on any corrections that need to be made. Avoiding making corrections yourself whenever possible is important, because when you do, you're giving that opportunity to learn and grow from your team member, you're taking that away from them. And you really need to let go to grow. It's a saying that I use a lot. How about follow through from you, the leader, on that clear, specific deadline? If you set a deadline for noon on Thursday, but they don't deliver, what happens? Do you remember the deadline? Or are you just counting on others to come through? What's going to jog your memory to remind you that the assignment is due? Pro tip here, calendar reminders are great for this, or a delegation log. How about if they don't come through? It's 1 p.m. on Thursday. The slides were due at noon. What happens next? Do you send an email asking where the assignment is? Do you meet to talk about what happened? Or do you let it slide? You already know this, but that's the moment the accountability rubber hits the real world road. Have the conversation. Don't let it slide, because it's a reflection of your accountability as a leader. In a few minutes, we'll give you some tools and techniques that will help you have this conversation. So if you're nervous about that part, stay tuned. I invite you now to look at 2C in your worksheet and ask yourself, which of these do you do best? And which can you improve? Creating that deadline buffer, scheduling deadline reminders, having the conversation. Now let's address the question that probably comes to mind first when we talk about accountability. Are they accountable? And what happens when others don't deliver on their obligations? How do you respond? This is the check phase. And we're going to talk a lot about this in the second half of the presentation, because this is the key. That's the moment as a leader for feedback and holding others accountable. But first, whatever kind of feedback you need to give it quickly. The longer the distance between the event, good or bad, and the feedback, the less actionable and meaningful the feedback is likely to be. If you're not sure how best to have the feedback conversation, especially if it's gone poorly in the past, think about that clarity, specificity, and priority from the plan phase and base your feedback on those things. What was the expectation? What specific ways did the person miss the mark? And what should the priority have been compared with how they actually prioritized? Then once you've talked about what happened, it's your job to get curious. Explore the things that went wrong or just didn't go right, and brainstorm together without blaming what you can do differently in the future. This is using lean thinking, staying with your curiosity until you reach a root cause, find a good countermeasure, and try again. I also want to encourage you to share the impact of the situation. It's, often if it's a course correction conversation where someone hasn't met the mark, you might need to share with them how this impacted others' work, your relationship, or the team's reputation and morale. Sometimes folks aren't thinking about the impact of late or incomplete or incorrect work beyond themselves. So help them see how they and their work connect to the bigger picture. Finally, we're going to talk a lot about this in a bit, but think about how they're likely to react and make a plan for how you want to respond, especially if you've got someone on your team who has a history of really strong reactions to surprising or corrective feedback, like anger or tears or strong denial of responsibility. Making a plan for what to say can make a huge difference in that outcome. I invite you now to look at 2D in your notebook. What would you like to do differently next time? Give feedback more quickly? Get curious and explore together? Explain the significance and the impact. Anticipate resistance. So once you've planned, once you've done, and once you've checked, it's time to act. This is where you commit as a leader. Creating a culture of accountability, the act of holding yourself and others accountable starts with you, and it really must become part of your DNA. Remember to think of it as using the lean foundations of PDCA: plan, do, check, act. Be vulnerable, practice, let others know that you're working on this and why. Doing so will help foster a lean culture where we can openly, respectfully, and kindly hold ourselves and each other accountable, living our values, doing our work, and getting better every day. Because we say in ALTA, we believe in better, right, Montana? So now I'm going to hand things over to Montana to really dive into the second part of this presentation, which is really all about feedback.
Thanks,
Take it away,
Amy.
Montana.
And welcome to the land of feedback. As Amy said, feedback is that critical moment in the PDCA accountability cycle that's really make or break for all of us. It's also, let's be real, the part of leadership that can feel the hardest, the most difficult to do well, and often the least rewarding. We want to help change that because there are better ways to plan and deliver feedback that are more likely to deliver good results. We also know that the ability to give and receive feedback well is absolutely essential to respecting people and continuous improvement in our efforts to build lean organizations in state government. Like accountability, feedback is also key to our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Giving high quality feedback and taking feedback well are essential to our DEI efforts and to the leadership toolkit at DSHS and ALTA. We know that good feedback practices support diversity. Giving and receiving feedback well helps us to attend and listen to each individual in their specific circumstances. High quality feedback ensures equity. Giving objective, actionable feedback removes the need for anyone to read into behavior or make assumptions, and that acts as a check on implicit bias. Taking feedback well is an essential practice of inclusion. Leaders who practice taking feedback well, no matter how it's delivered, create a space for everyone to share openly and to feel safe, even when the topic is uncomfortable or challenging. So how do you do it? Well, the first concept we want to introduce today is that there are three kinds of feedback. One of the most common reasons that feedback can be tough to give as well as to receive is that we're not always on the same page about what's on the menu. The three most common types of feedback we give and receive are appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. Let's take a look at what makes each of these different. When your boss says how grateful they are to have you on the team, that's appreciation. Appreciation is fundamentally about relationship and human connection. At a literal level, it says, thanks. But appreciation also conveys, I see you. I know how hard you've been working, and you matter to me. Being seen and feeling understood by others matters to us deeply. As children, those needs are really close to the surface, right? As we yell across the playground, hey mom, hey dad, hey grandma, watch this. And we never outgrow the need for someone to say, hey, wow, look at you go. We never outgrow that need for flashes of acknowledgement that say, yes, I see you, I get you, you matter. Appreciation motivates us. It gives us a bounce in our step and the energy to redouble our efforts. When people complain that they don't get enough feedback at work, they sometimes mean that they wonder whether anyone notices or cares how hard they're working. They don't want advice, they want appreciation. Now, when you ask your boss for more direction, you are asking for coaching. Coaching is aimed at trying to help someone grow, learn, or change. The focus is on helping the person improve, whether it involves a skill, an idea, knowledge, a particular practice, or that person's appearance or personality. Your driving instructor, that technician at the IT help desk, the veteran employee assigned to show you the ropes on your first day, and that empathetic friend who advises you on your personal life. These are all coaches in this sense. So are bosses and clients and grandparents and peers and siblings, our direct reports, and our children. Anytime you ask for help getting better at a task, in your relationship, or as a person, the feedback you're looking for is coaching. Now, when your boss says that your performance is extremely strong and they want you to apply for a promotion, that's evaluation. In this case, positive. Evaluation tells you where you stand. It's an assessment, a ranking, or a rating. Your middle school report card, your time in a 5K, the blue ribbon awarded to your apple pie, the offer of that promotional job you competed for. These are all evaluations. Your performance review, which may say outperforms or meet expectations or needs improvement, is an evaluation. Evaluations are always in some respect comparisons, implicitly or explicitly, against others or against a particular set of standards. You are not a good cook. That's shorthand for you're not a good cook compared with what I hoped for in a cook, or compared with my beloved grandmother, greatest cook of all. It's important to have transparency in the criteria we are being evaluated against. When we do, evaluations align our expectations, they clarify consequences, and they inform our decision-making. Your rating has implications for your career prospects. Your time trial result means you did or didn't qualify to compete in a race. A part of what can be hard about evaluation is concern about possible consequences, real or imagined. I didn't qualify for the race. That's real. And I never will. That's predicted or imagined. And sometimes our self-evaluations contain judgments that go way beyond the assessment itself. Not only did I not qualify in the time trial, but I was naive to think I would. And so once again, I have fallen short of my potential.
Oh, ouch, ouch.
The judgment that I'm naive or falling short is not based on the assessment, the outcome of that race. It's an additional layer of opinion on top of it. And it's the bullwhip of negative judgment from ourselves or from others that produces so much of our anxiety around feedback. Now, surprisingly, reassurance, which my friend Amy Basil is an expert at delivering, it sounds like you can do this and I believe in you. That also falls into the category of additional judgments, but on the positive side.
You know, when it's wonderful to hear that is when your adult children say that to you. You feel like you've gotten somewhere with that.
Right? You planted that seed and it's blooming at you. So we've all had a lifetime of feedback by now, and some of that was probably misaligned with what we wanted, expected, or even thought was appropriate. So now I'm going to ask you to reflect on a time when you got the wrong kind of feedback. Maybe you got coaching when you wanted appreciation, or you were hoping to learn where you stood in the rankings and you got some feedback about improving your skills instead. Or you wanted advice about how to get better, but all Amy would tell you is how great you are and how much she appreciates you. So think about a time when this has happened to you, right? You were expecting one kind of feedback, but what you got was something different. How did that impact you? We're going to launch a poll now, and your answers will be anonymous. But which of these impacts did you experience when you got the wrong kind of feedback? You can choose as many options as you'd like.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them to choose from, and
Sure.
I've been in that situation many times. I have to say, in my career,
Absolutely.
and it does really impact us. You know, if you're going in and you're expecting one thing and you get something totally different, it can just really rock your confidence
Yeah.
in what you were doing and how well you did it. And it can also, I think, really impact, like, you know, some of these are like, you know, I shut down. I thought less of the feedback giver. I mean, it can impact how well we are going to take you know, feedback in the future, and how willing we are to receive it from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm seeing our responses slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to end the polling and just share with folks. But take a look at how many people have had similar experiences, right? Especially that one that says, I wasn't sure the feedback giver understood my role or my job or my work. That's a really common one. So think about what this means for giving feedback, right? How important it is to do it well, how impactful it can be when it goes wrong. So as we move on, I just want to thank everybody for being willing to kind of be vulnerable and share your experiences. The reality is we need all three kinds of feedback to be healthy and functional. Each form of feedback satisfies a different set of human needs. We need evaluation to know where we stand, to set expectations, to feel reassured or secure. We need coaching to accelerate learning, to focus our time and energy where it really matters most, to keep our relationships healthy and functioning. And we need appreciation, by golly, if all the sweat and tears we put into our jobs and our relationships are going to feel worthwhile. As Amy likes to say, if you want to ace feedback, focus on your ability to deliver all three types well: appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. You need them all. I need them all. We all need them all.
And I need acronyms so I can remember things.
Absolutely.
So just be really transparent with that.
You got that one for free, courtesy of Amy Basil.
There you go.
All right, so now that we've convinced you to give all three kinds of feedback and to get really good at giving it, you are probably wondering what makes really great feedback anyway. Well, we are here to share with you that there are 4 elements that all high quality feedback has in common. Great feedback presents an objective observation. It shares the impact of what was observed. It opens up a conversation about next steps, and maybe most importantly, it creates the space for the feedback giver to gain a greater understanding of the situation. So that first element of high quality feedback is to share your observations. Really good feedback of any kind on any subject is focused on behavior. And it begins by describing what has happened in the past objectively. What's the specific behavior or action you want to discuss? What did you observe? Note the lack of interpretations or judgments at this step. All you want to do here is report what happened, what somebody did or said, and not what you think or believe about that behavior. The second element is impact, and Amy touched on this earlier really well. The kind of behavior, positive or otherwise, that you need to give feedback about is important because it has some impact on the team, on the work, on a client, a stakeholder, even you. Call out that impact and make it clear. Again, avoid interpretations or judgments about the impact, just like you did with that first element of observation. The key here is to report the impact you and others have experienced as objectively as possible. The third part of really great feedback is focused on the future. What's next? When you give feedback, you are always talking about past performance and behaviors. It's important to speak clearly about your observations and the impact of things that have happened in the past. But the goal of feedback is always, always to create a better future. Now, the future is where I plan to spend every day of the rest of my life. So I like to move toward it with some dispatch. When I coach leaders about giving feedback, especially critical or corrective feedback, I strongly encourage them to be clear, concise, and honest about the past, and to move forward to the future quickly. That's why your next step in giving feedback is to talk about the next step. What's going to happen now as a result of what you observed and the impact that it had. This should be, in most cases, a conversation both in and about the very near future, right? You want to have a conversation about what to do next right now in this meeting together. Why? You're probably wondering. Well, if you come to the feedback conversation with a predetermined consequence, it will feel like a monologue, and what you want is a dialogue. It'll be less meaningful to the feedback receiver, and importantly, less likely to lead to meaningful change. Why? Because they're being acted on instead of participating. And in the case of corrective feedback, this will feel much more punitive. So here's what I recommend as a model for those kinds of tough conversations. Here's what I observed. Here's the impact. Now I want to spend the rest of this conversation talking about how we are going to resolve this together. Now you've opened up a dialogue and you've invited your feedback receiver to participate in a creative problem-solving session with your help. Instead of feeling acted on, punished, helpless, and alone, even the good person getting bad news now has a sense of agency and a supportive partner in turning things around. Finally, let's open the door of understanding. The great anxiety that feedback conversations tend to generate in both givers and receivers is most often tied to a fear of judgment. Human beings are hardwired to crave acceptance and inclusion. And feeling judged quickly triggers our deep fear of being excluded, isolated, and alone in the universe. The antidote to the poison of judgment is curiosity. If you can train yourself to notice when you're judging, pause and choose to get curious instead, you will very often discover things you didn't know that just may change your whole perspective. Now, my favorite way to get curious and to express curiosity in a way that feels authentic to others is to start a sentence with, "Help me understand." This opener communicates humility, openness, and interest in a way that can really change the tone and tenor of difficult conversations. Avoid questions that start with the word why. Why? Why feels judgmental. It conveys the message whether you intend it to or not. I don't know what you were thinking, but you were wrong. Why would you do that? Help me understand will help you diffuse tension, defensiveness, and anger, often before it's even shown up. So by now, most of you are probably imagining some feedback you need or want to give, and hopefully imagining how much easier it's going to be if you apply the tools we're sharing here. As you're planning out this feedback you need to give, you can probably also picture how the feedback recipient is going to respond. You can see it in your mind, can't you? Exactly the face they'll make at each point in your thoughtful plan and the behavior or behaviors you're likely to see on the other side of the screen or the table. In fact, you probably anticipate the reactions of people you're going to give feedback to anytime you give it to them. And I bet you're right most of the time. You are great at predicting the reactions of the folks around you. But how often do you plan a response to those anticipated reactions, especially if they're likely to be negative? And how often have you even tried to change your approach in order to avoid them? Maybe you've tried to change yourself holistically, right? Maybe in anticipation of negative reactions, you've tried different ways of presenting the information. Or maybe you've tried framing things as challenges rather than problems. Or you've come prepared to back up your observations with a long list of irrefutable data points. I have seen folks try all of these methods for mitigating negative reactions and many more, but I have rarely seen those kinds of strategies lead to a different outcome. What's been more successful is a thoughtful plan that anticipates specific resistance or reaction behaviors, right? Things like denying the problem, deflecting responsibility onto others, crying, the silent treatment, shutting down, right? And then identifying a response that's designed to diffuse tension and move quickly into problem solving. So remember that most strong negative reactions to feedback are triggered by our human fear of judgment. And what's the antidote to judgment, Amy?
Curiosity.
That's right, curiosity. So when you're facing resistance, get curious, and you're likely to have a much better conversation. Try this the next time you see one of those resistance behaviors. I can see you're having a strong reaction to what I just said. Help me understand what's going on for you. Okay, now we're going to launch a quick poll and ask you to share, again anonymously, what are some of the reactions you have experienced when you've given feedback in the past? The poll will not contain a complete inventory of the rainbow of human responses, but it's a short list of the ones that Amy and I see and hear about most commonly. How many of these have you experienced yourself? You can choose, I believe, as many answers as you like.
Oh, actually, this one was set up as a single choice, although it should have been.
Okay, well,
looks
pick
like
the one you
multiple
saw
choice.
last time.
That's all right. That is quite all right. But at least folks are saying that they can identify with at least one of these, right? They've seen this. This is not new news. This is how people respond to feedback. And
especially if it's challenging.
Exactly.
All right, well, we have a lot of really great responses here, and I'm going to go ahead and end polling because I think we have a clear winner here. Defensiveness for the win. I don't think anyone's surprised by that. And you know, defensiveness is a little bit of a label. It's a little bit of a vague category. So when you're thinking about defensiveness, think about the specific words people use, the behaviors. Are you seeing folded arms? Are you seeing head down? Are you seeing less talking, maybe more talking? Maybe I'm angry, maybe I'm blaming others, right? It's important to get a little bit behind that label when you're trying to plan a response so that you're responding to the behavior. And we'll talk a little bit about that more as we move forward. All right, so I invite you now to take a look at item number 3 in your worksheet. This is a template you can easily use to give feedback. And I did peek at the Q&A and saw somebody asked if there was a cheat sheet. Here it is, right? For the purposes of our time today, we're going to let you take this as homework, but use it. If you look below the feedback template as well, you'll see that we have shared examples of what each of the 4 elements of great feedback might look like for those 3 types of feedback, right? Appreciation, coaching, and evaluation that we talked about earlier. Hopefully you'll find these helpful as you are planning and crafting your high quality feedback for the future, right? And I want to encourage you to take this plan you're surely going to make and any feedback plans you create in the future and get some feedback before you put them into action. You will notice that the last line on your little feedback template, your cheat sheet, asks, who can you ask to help you practice? Your colleagues are an amazing source of support, feedback, and insight when you are preparing for an important conversation, right? Look around you at that peer level at other folks who are doing similar work, who are leading similar projects, leading similar teams, right? And reach out to them. Because if you do actually practice, if you run through the talking points on your plan, and even have that trusted partner maybe role play some of those resistance and reaction behaviors you expect to see so you can practice your responses in real time. If you do this, you will see 2 distinct benefits. First, even though it was a practice session, your brain and your body will feel like you've already had at least a version of this conversation once. It can seriously lower your anxiety and nervousness when you do it for real. Second, because you've already said the words once and been able to fine-tune your talking points, it'll sound even better the second time around. Try it, and I promise you will see what I mean. Okay, as we move toward our closure, I just want to switch gears to talk about something that for every single one of us, regardless of our role, is honestly even more important than how you give feedback, and that's how you take it. There's a wonderful book that I have drawn some of the tips from this presentation from called Thanks for the Feedback. Honestly, if everybody who ever worked with anybody else read and adopted the principles in this book, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today. But since we don't live in that world yet, I'm going to give you some of the key insights from this and some other sources that I have seen truly make a difference in how well leaders take feedback. These are also tips that you can use when you are coaching others. If you've got someone on your team, let's say, who makes it kind of difficult to give them important feedback, you'll find some concrete points here to help you help them take feedback more effectively and graciously. Where do we start, right? Well, as human beings, part of our problem with feedback is that we're really good at rejecting and resisting it when we don't want or aren't prepared to hear what's being said. One of the primary ways we resist feedback is by denying the fact set completely. This even happens sometimes when people receive appreciation. Think about folks you've known who just can't take a compliment. The fact is, we are really good at what the authors of Thanks for the Feedback call wrong spotting. What they mean is it's really easy to dismiss feedback as wrong if that's what you're looking for, because there's bound to be something wrong or incorrect in any high stakes communication, right, Amy?
Absolutely.
You may hear things like this in response to feedback. I didn't ignore the email you sent on Monday. You actually sent it the Friday before. Or, well, maybe you heard anger, but everybody else knows that's just me being passionate. Or, don't tell me I'm a bad listener. If you cannot tell me what you want me to do differently, it is not helpful. If any of that sounded familiar, you are in good company because I have said each of those things myself. The point is, if you are looking for a reason to dismiss feedback, you are almost sure to find it. But try to stop yourself the next time you feel this urge, because wrong spotting not only defeats the feedback giver, it defeats the possibility that you can learn from this. Now, my favorite part about this great book, Thanks for the Feedback, is its subtitle, Receiving Feedback Well, even when it is off base, unfair, poorly delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. Because this is the kind of feedback we get most often, right? Can you think of a time when you got the perfect feedback delivered in the perfect way at the perfect time? Unless you were winning a Nobel Prize or having a cat choose your lap of all laps to curl up on, my guess is that you haven't really gotten feedback that's perfect before. So the question becomes, how do you turn imperfect feedback into a valuable learning opportunity, even when you're not in the mood? The first step is to pause. Create some space between what you heard or read and what you're going to do next. Now, let's acknowledge this is hard. Most of us are programmed to defend ourselves from anything we see as criticism. It's usually our first reaction, just like it is in those folks who you were anticipating reactions from before, right? In most cases, without practice, we just can't help ourselves. There is a gap, we know this, between stimulus and response, between what's said and our reaction to it. But for almost all of us, that gap starts out pretty small, maybe microscopic, right? Most of us jump straight from what we're hearing to what we're going to do about it with very little time to consider possible paths to the future. But I'm here to tell you that the pause is absolutely something you can exercise like a muscle. It gets bigger and stronger over time as you use it. And the more you practice taking a breath and meditating for even a moment about what you could say and maybe what you should say, the more often you will find yourself making a strategic choice about what to say next, rather than having a reaction you may regret later. But this doesn't mean you need to swallow your reaction. If you're surprised, bewildered, or confused, it's appropriate to share that, right? I have said things like, wow, I'm surprised to hear that. Or, that's not how I see myself at all. Or, I had a really different interpretation. If you say something like this, acknowledging your reaction without disagreeing with the feedback, you'll bring something absolutely essential into the conversation: authenticity. If you share your authentic gut reaction without arguing or wrong spotting, and then follow that with something like, tell me more, you have just created the conditions for a really open and honest conversation. So let's be real though, right? Because we're humans and we're not quite there yet. So what happens when you screw it up? What do you do when you catch yourself having a reaction, getting defensive after the words have already left your mouth and your feedback giver is looking startled and shrinking in their seat, right? What do you do when it's too late and you've already stepped in it? It's never too late. Hit the reset button. When you have that oops moment and you catch yourself, stop, take a breath, acknowledge your slip up. If you say to Amy, Amy, that's really not how I wanted to respond to you. I am sorry. Can I hit the reset button and try again? Amy's not likely to tell you no, right? And again, you've brought that invaluable authenticity into the conversation. Finally, once you get really good at this, right? And you're pausing and you're breathing and you're not biting off your feedback giver's head, right? How do you explore their feedback to make the most of it? Seek first to understand is a quote from the late, great Stephen Covey. And if there's one piece of advice I would give to anyone who wants to live their life more harmoniously and find greater success in pretty much any arena, it is this: seek first to understand. In addition to our very human fear of judgment, one of the things that makes feedback a scary proposition is that it's often vague, it's abstract, it's too general to be acted on, right? Telling me that I need to be more proactive, or I seem distracted, or that you wish I took things more seriously, that's about as helpful as me sending Amy to the store for soup or meat. Without more concrete information, she is unlikely to find success. So when you get that feedback that's little more than a label, get curious. Often just saying, tell me more or help me understand will launch you on a voyage of discovery. But you can also use the same tools that helped you give great feedback in that feedback plan that you have to get behind the label and turn even the most abstract criticism into something useful. So ask, what have you observed? What was the impact? What might I do next? And of course, help me understand.
All right. So We are at the end of our time,
Yeah.
and we're so sorry. Apparently, as per usual, Montana and I had a lot to say because we're really excited about this topic. So we're not really going to have time for Q&A. But if you do have any questions that you want to put in the survey, that we can. Well, I guess that's anonymous. We really wouldn't be able to give that. But darn it. But thank you so much. We hope that you have seen that accountability and feedback are absolutely integral to one another and to our DEI efforts. Both are essential to obtaining those positive results and desirable and equitable outcomes. So, as we close our presentation and let you get on your way, just remember those tips and tricks in your cheat sheet. Set your teams up for success with that clarity, specificity, and priority. Think about that accountability, and from the feedback perspective, really make that plan, use that template, because we know that you'll be really successful if you do. So thank you again so much to our friends here in Results Washington. Thank you to Melissa for the wonderful interpretive skills and talents. And thank you to everyone who took time today to join us in this session. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're wonderful. Keep growing, keep getting better.
Thank you, Amy in Montana. That was a fabulous session, and I'm sure everyone got some great aha moments out of that. I did. Everyone, tomorrow's the last day of the conference, but there's still 4 more sessions you could check out. So check out our website, sign up for more, or check out some of the things you may have missed. In a second, that survey will pop up. We appreciate you taking that. Have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thanks everyone.